All right, welcome again, everybody. And I'd like to turn this over now to my colleague, Sarita Pillai, and she will introduce the panel and get us going.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth and final panel in this four-part panel series focused on the Massachusetts Data Science Workforce Challenge. I will look to my colleagues for a thumbs up that my audio is okay and keep going in the meantime. For those of you who joined our panels in December, January, and February, welcome back. For those of you that are newly joining us, it's great to have you here today. And please be sure to check out our website, datascience.edc.org, to view the prior panel recordings, as well as to access all the other information about this initiative. As Kirsten said, my name is Sarita Pillai, and I am Director of STEM and Workforce Development Initiatives at Education Development Center. And we're really thrilled to be sponsoring this event and this series with our partners, the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center and the Massachusetts Biotechnology Education Foundation. And together, we really developed the series to try and think about and address a critical issue impacting the biotechnology and life sciences sector that are both so vital to our state's economy. The purpose of this series has been to inform and generate awareness amongst a broad multi-sector group of leaders on four key topics around which each of these four panels have been framed. First, the nature of the work that's performed in data science and the types of jobs that exist within the field, which we discussed in our December panel. Second, the role that existing state education and workforce policies can play in supporting what we're calling an early stage, that is a high school and community college data science initiative. And that was discussed in our January panel. The central role that an early stage initiative can play in expanding both the long-term size as well as the diversity of the future data science workforce, and how diversity and inclusion programs can really serve as models to guide the creation of similar programs to engage and support a broader community of students interested in data science. And that was our third panel last month in February. And fourth, today, we'll be talking about EDC's role in securing several $1 million in federal funding for this early stage data science initiative that we hope can, in collaboration with the work of our partners, really provide a major new platform for growing the state's data science workforce. And we will be hearing much more about that in our panel today. After each panel, we have produced a brief, a document, a summary of the panel that really summarizes the high-level key points generated by each of the panel discussions, and we've posted those to our website, again, datascience.edc.org. That website also houses all the other relevant information about the series that you will need, panel recordings, how to stay in touch with us, etc. And as we reach the conclusion of the panel series today, our plan from the start has really been to convene a working group, essentially, to distill the knowledge that we've gained from these discussions in order to develop a strategic, programmatic, and funding plan for that we hope will be both systemic and sustainable and scalable in terms of this early stage initiative for growing the size and the diversity of the data science workforce in Massachusetts. And we really hope that many of you will continue to stay connected to this initiative, to contribute to those efforts, the efforts of the working group as that evolves in the coming months. Thank you to all the panelists that are joining us today. Each of them will introduce themselves to you before they get ready to start making their comments. The panel will be followed, as in our previous panels, by an opportunity for our panelists to respond to questions from you. So please do type your questions into the chat. Our team is keeping track of that, and we'll make sure that we pose your questions to our panelists during the open Q&A that we will have at the end. But before we hear from our panelists, and by way of essentially framing today's presentation, I wanted to give very briefly a highlight of some of the high-level takeaways from our first three panels in the series. From the first panel in December, which featured four data scientists, we learned that companies and academic institutes are indeed really eager to grow their data science workforce, and that the most valued skills and knowledge are in the fields of biology, computer science, software engineering, and statistics. We also learned that recent college graduates with strong mathematics and programming skills are extremely strong candidates for higher degree programs in data science. Our second panel in January helped us understand that the state of Massachusetts has and is working to expand several education policies and pathway programs that are designed to help female, underrepresented minority, and economically disadvantaged students become aware of the range of STEM careers that are available to them and to participate in secondary and post-secondary programs that are a good match for their interests and their passions. And it was clear from that panel that the data science field, that data science as a field would be really well positioned to take advantage of those policies and programs that are really designed to ensure broader participation in STEM education and career pathways in the state. Our third panel last month enlightened us about the truly formidable challenges by way of systemic racism and resistance that our panelists as national thought leaders and education leaders have faced over many years as they've sought to provide equality of opportunity for female, underrepresented minority, and economically disadvantaged students to be really fully prepared to pursue STEM careers. Our panel last month also shared their insights about effective strategies to inform and engage students, parents, and really the larger community about career opportunities in data science. And that brings us to today's panel, again, the fourth and final panel in this series, where we will be hearing from EDC and our key partners in this work about the emerging and substantial work that we're doing in data science pathways at the secondary and community college levels, how we address equity, diversity, inclusion as really guiding principles for all of the work that we do, and that reinforces our belief that equity and excellence are inseparable and that diversity is truly what drives innovation in all fields. So with that, I will turn now to our first presenter and ask Randy Cochiever to briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background, Randy, and your interest in the importance of data literacy for all students.
All right, thanks so much, Sarita, and thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Randy Cochiever. I'm director of the Oceans of Data Institute at EDC. By training, I'm a marine biologist. So when I first started working with the folks at EDC, it was, I was at Stanford University. We were tracking animals using electronic tags and following them around the ocean. And Ruth Krumhansel, who was at EDC and who founded the Oceans of Data Institute, said, how cool would it be if we could share those data with students? And so we, after months and months of thinking about it and working at it, we developed an NSF proposal to build a custom interface that would allow students to interact with those data. And so we started testing that out in high school classrooms, and we quickly realized that we also needed to have a really robust curriculum that we could use with those materials. And we also needed to be doing professional development with teachers. And so we've continued over the years since that original project to be working sort of at two strands. So one of those strands has really focused on the curriculum development side, identifying the skills that are required for working with students to achieve data literacy skills. And a lot of the skills that we're teaching come from the other strand of work in the Oceans of Data Institute, which is about building career pathways. So Joyce Malyn-Smith will be speaking later about some of the work that we've done to create educational profiles so that we know what those skills are that are needed in the workplace. And on the curriculum development side, we started with working with high school students and early community college students, developing curriculum around skills like being able to decode representations of data, being able to describe patterns of relationship within a data set, being able to draw conclusions from data, making claims and supporting them with data as evidence, those kinds of things. So from that initial Ocean Tracks project, we've launched off in a number of different directions. We've worked with students now, starting in high school, going to middle school. We're working now with elementary school kids, and all along the way are trying to build that trajectory that will lead them to being data literate individuals by the time that they are ready to start thinking about going to college or entering the workforce.
Great, thank you, Randy. I also know that your interest in career, we also know certainly from the research that interest in careers is sparked often as early as the middle school years. And that's certainly relevant to the work that you've done. So could you talk a little bit about the work you've done, particularly with the NASA real world, real science curriculum?
Absolutely.
And talk about outcomes from that work?
Sure. Yeah, so the Real World Real Science Project is this big 5-year collaboration that we did with the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, Stanford University, and some regional museums and science centers in Maine. And the main thrust of that project, at the center of this project, is this experience called Lab Venture. And so every kid in 5th or 6th grade in Maine, at some point in their 5th or 6th grade year, they visit the Gulf of Maine Research Institute for this 2.5-hour long field trip experience, where they get to actually interact with authentic data. They get to learn more about the work that scientists do. And our task in this with this NASA funding was to sort of reinvent that program with more focus on the use of authentic data and the building of these basic data literacy skills. And the focus of the program became around changes that are happening in the Gulf of Maine in response to climate change. So our work at EDC was both to conduct research on that field trip experience, as well as to develop curriculum that would extend that experience into their classrooms. And so the idea was that students that would go through this field trip experience, they would go back to their classrooms, and within a week or so, they would do a module that sort of recapped that the experience that they had there at GMRI, and would sort of launch them on this trajectory to do more exploration. And so there was a module called Shape of Change, where we would give them some new tools that they would be using in the classroom. And then finally, they would engage with these ecosystem modules that allowed them to explore how climate change is affecting the regional ecosystems that they live in. So whether it's looking at ticks and Lyme disease, or looking at lynx and hare populations, or staying in the ocean and looking at the relationship between right whales and copepods. All of these were data-focused modules that roll out over several days, and that allow the students to use authentic data to really explore these questions kind of the same way that a scientist would. And so we've just finished up that work at the end of this past year. And one of the things that was really exciting was that there was this novel assessment tool that was developed as part of the project that was called choice-based assessment. And we found that even with a relatively short intervention, even after working with students for just a couple of weeks on these modules, we were able to detect real changes, both dispositional changes in their comfort in working with data, their ability to engage with data, and also their gains in specific data using skills. So it was really exciting to see a measurable change even in students that young.
That is very exciting. Thanks, Randy, for sharing that. I know you've also been doing work that engages with high school students and teachers, implementing particularly the Zoom and Zoom in mobility projects that you're working on. So if you could talk a bit about those and sort of outcomes from that work, I think that would really be useful to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the real challenges, I think, in teaching data literacy skills is getting to that point where a student is able to take all of these loose ends and tie them together and articulate what their findings are. And there's a group at EDC that had developed this novel interface called Zoom In for teaching history. And the way this thing worked, it's a web-based platform where they would interact with artifacts, historical artifacts like cartoons or paintings or writings from the day. And this platform would scaffold their ability to develop an argument, an explanation for what they were seeing, and to write a thesis about it. And so it was really this ability to sort of make an argument from evidence. And so the idea of the Zoom In project was, could we, instead of showing these historical artifacts, could we have a data window there and have them interacting with authentic data, making graphs, doing some statistical analysis. And so that was the Zoom In Science project. And then we got, which was NSF funded, and then we got some additional funding from GM to build a couple of other modules that were about urban mobility. And what we found with all of these is that one, teachers were really excited about this. The Zoom In Science modules we had 3 Earth Science modules and 3 biology modules. And this made data really accessible, which is something that teachers were asking for. It made it easy to incorporate data into their teaching. The other thing that we learned about this, I just exchanged emails with the researcher that led that side of the project, is that it really became clear that facilitation, that the role of the instructor is really critical in success, even when you have this sort of self-supporting web-based interface. You really need a skilled teacher. And I think that that's where some of our work is focusing now, is on that instruction piece, and really focusing on how we support teachers in doing this work effectively.
Thanks, Randy. That's great. Yeah, this whole notion of sort of argumentation and sort of evidence-based engagement with authentic data is just such a hugely important issue to be able to sort of bring into the classroom, and how we can better prepare educators to be a part of that conversation is super important. So thank you so much for sharing all that you've done around middle and high school data science pathway experiences. Thanks, Randy. I'm going to move on to my colleague, Joyce. And I'm going to ask Joyce for you to introduce yourself, and then I will follow up with a couple of questions for you. Joyce?
Thank you, Sarita. My name is Joyce Malyn-Smith, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I began my career with more than 20 years as a teacher and administrator in Boston Public Schools, where I became known as a change maker, working to develop a more equitable system in response to the desegregation decrees that happened quite a while ago. I was then recruited into EDC to work on industry skill standards, to look at the kinds of expertise needed in the workplace, and then help to figure out how the foundational skills of those skills can be built into the K-12 curriculum. And since then, I've developed a body of work to better understand how people develop skill and knowledge in and out of school, and then translate that into a productive and rewarding career. So I've also worked with expert workers to define emerging occupations, and that's really led me to study the future of work and the foundational skills that students need to be successful when they leave school and negotiate their adult life roles as both informed citizens and workers. So
Thanks, Joyce,
Yeah.
for introducing yourself. So I have 3 questions for you. And I will preface the first question by saying you have multiple NSF grants, but one of the ones we want to talk about is this multi-year grant that you have from the NSF, the National Science Foundation, to develop a high school computational biology, chemistry, and physics curriculum. So I want to make sure that's clear. It's a computational biology, computational chemistry, computational physics curriculum in Massachusetts high schools. So my first question is, sort of what informed your thinking in terms of proposing what's really a really ambitious and innovative project?
Thank you, Sarita. I guess what informed my thinking is really a combination of my experiences both with Boston Public Schools and aha moments I've had in developing projects here at EDC. In Boston schools, one of the lessons that I learned that informed my thinking is that students from under-resourced communities are really desperately seeking opportunities for an economic lever so that they have options to move to a different neighborhood, to buy food and clothing, to make a better life for themselves and their children. And this is a real driver of needs for many high school students today, especially students from under-resourced communities. And then another aha moment that really informed the development of this project is a conversation I had with the then Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense Research, where we shared with him a profile of one of the emerging occupations that was then titled the Computational Thinking Research Scientist, where we really looked forward and had conversations with people working at the cutting edge of technology to find out what was the work that they did and how they would define what they needed to know and be able to do to work successfully. And in that profile, there were tasks such as prepares data visualizations, tells the data story, runs simulations, selects tools, software, programming environment, writes software to automate tasks. And he looked at this profile, which we thought as educators to be extremely innovative, and then said, this is nothing new. This describes what scientists do every day. And I have to tell you, that was a real turning point for me, because I thought we had come up with a new way to look at science, only to find out that this is the work that scientists all do. And it made me then question, how many times have I seen in science classes students using computers? How many times have I seen them working with big data? I thought of my own children who were in exceptionally really good classical high schools, and they had never had a computer in their science courses. And the only computer science course that they offered at that school was advanced computer science. So it really made me wonder whether all students who did not have this kind of exposure might end up being the disadvantaged students of the future. And it made me worried as an educator. And I guess the last then was was the opportunity that came forward when DESE had completed their digital literacy and computer science standards and was looking for ways to integrate those standards to be able to reach all students. And from conversations with DESE, we realized that this timing was right and it was a good fit all around to develop this type of an initiative. And let me just describe it for one moment, that the computational science courses, which are computational biology, computational chemistry, computational physics, were integrating computer modeling and simulation and data into traditional science courses. And that units were focused on having students use, decode, modify computer models as they explored scientific phenomena, that there was no need for any prior computer science experience from teachers or students, and that whatever professional development would be needed would be provided by the project. So I just wanted to just give a quick overview of that.
Thank you, Joyce.
And those are the things that really led to this project.
That's really helpful to hear, sort of that trajectory of thinking and the work that builds upon, and certainly sort of the importance of sort of computer science, computational thinking, all of that, which is sort of the larger umbrella under which sort of data science work sort of sits, and how important that is for us to sort of think about in terms of K-12 and post-secondary. So I guess my Go back up here, make sure I have all my questions in order. My next question, I guess, is to think about, when you think about the colleagues and the partners that are part of this particular project in terms of, developing the curricula, doing the professional development, training teachers, field testing the curriculum, all of that you shared with us. How do you see this curriculum benefiting and engaging really an array of students, all students, if we might think about that in the state of Massachusetts?
Well, I think it's going to benefit and engage students, first of all, because it'll be embedded into courses that all students usually take during high school. Most students are in a program where they must take some science course. Almost all students take biology. So this will be an opportunity to be able to hit all of the students in the state, has the opportunity to do that. And we have some terrific partners and colleagues in the project to help us do this. And Malin, the DESE's computer science and STEM integration specialist, is a co-principal investigator of this project, helping to lead this. So is Irene Lee, who is the director of Project GUTS, an EDC staff member and a research scientist from MIT. She's leading the professional development and curriculum. We have a wonderful team of experts in research and professional development and online learning from EDC. And we have a team of biology, chemistry, and physics teachers from Massachusetts and New Mexico who are experienced in computer modeling and science disciplines for developing and testing the curriculum. And I also want to note that we're moving into our research phase now, and we're recruiting Massachusetts biology, chemistry, and physics teacher who'd like to join the project to participate in the research study and teach these courses. So anyone out there interested in participating can contact me or any one of our team to figure out how to do that. So I think we have an opportunity to have a very broad impact and reach students across the state in every high school in districts in the state of Massachusetts. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Great, thank you, Joyce. And then my last question, and it sort of relates to the prior question, and you may have covered some of this, so you can be as brief or provide as much detail as you want. Do you see this new curriculum as potentially providing a platform that might interest sort of this larger, a more diverse group of students in data science while they're still in high school?
When thinking about the future of work, a lot of my work has focused on learning about career development. And guiding career development does not mean preparing students for a job interview. It's a long-term process to help students develop the skills and knowledge to explore what they do well and to help them connect those things to future career opportunities. All 10 of these units in each one of the courses is going to help students develop the skills and knowledge they use that they can develop in using data. And I think that this is going to help them develop the competence and confidence in working with data and provide them with a platform that could interest them in pursuing interests and careers in data science. I think the most important part of this project now, every project we work on asks us to think about new questions and new directions. It's coming to mind now that this is a really important project because not only for what it's doing, but it's helping students develop the skills and knowledge they'll need to work at the intersections of disciplines where discovery and innovation occur. And in this particular project, it's the intersection of science and data. And if we look now at where innovations are occurring in our bioscience industry across the state, it's really important for us to now begin to understand what it is that students need to learn to know and be able to do to be able to work at those intersections. And those kinds of skills will really give them an advantage when they leave school and enter into the world of work. So I think this is a terrific project.
I concur, Joyce. Thank you so much. I think that's super important in terms of thinking about those intersections really of the disciplines and the way the data science sort of is a through line through multiple disciplines and how we innovate in STEM fields. So thank you very, very much for that.
I'd like to add one more thing, Sarita, and that's that just as if people don't know, the Stellar Center developed a couple of years ago a report on the foundational skills needed for success in future work, and data turned out to be one of those foundational skills that was identified by leaders in the field at the time, data and computational thinking and several others. So we're pretty sure that that data and data skills are not only important now, but will become increasingly important as a foundational skill like reading, writing, arithmetic, math, and computer science. So we have a lot to look forward to.
Thank you, Joyce, and thanks, Kirsten, for posting that link in chat. Joyce mentioned the Stellar Center. It stands for the STEM Learning and Research Center, which is a project at EDC funded by the National Science Foundation that supports the NSF ITEST program, which is one of their flagship K-12, but also workforce development programs. So thank you for making that connection, Joyce, and for Kirsten for posting that article that folks can take a look at. And with that, I am actually going to turn now to my colleague, Rebecca Lewis at EDC, and ask her to introduce herself before we dig into some questions about her work.
Thank you, Sarita. As Sarita mentioned, I am working with her at EDC and have for almost 20 years been there working on issues of equity and access to STEM. I originally came to EDC actually working on broadening participation of girls and women in STEM, and have really focused since that work, some federally funded work ended about 20 years ago, on corporate initiatives focused on how do we really fundamentally change how we teach science and engineering, particularly at the middle and high school levels, so that we're broadening participation, drawing in students who are traditionally underserved and underrepresented in those fields. For the last 10 years or so, I have worked primarily on the Amgen Biotech Experience, which is an initiative I'll be speaking about, funded by the Amgen Foundation. I also am currently the PI on a project focused on helping bring more women veterans into the STEM workforce.
Thanks, Rebecca. So a lot to dig into there. Rebecca will mostly be talking about her work that's funded by the Amgen Foundation, but I also want to reiterate the work that we've most recently done, or Rebecca's most recently done, also NSF funded, also through a grant through the Boeing Foundation, through Boeing Corporation, around women veterans in STEM. So lots of different ways in which we are looking at equity issues in STEM and the STEM workforce. So Rebecca, kind of building on the discussion that we've just had with Randy and then also with Joyce around the high school science curriculum, could you describe a little bit what the focus has been for the Amgen Biotech Experience, which at this point is, I think, a 30-year-old program?
Correct.
Sort of what is ABE, so Amgen Biotech Experience as a program? How do schools get involved? What's the training that teachers receive? Also, what's sort of the response and feedback from teachers, and any other outcomes that you want to discuss, and sort of how effectively the program has been able to reach the many communities that are high priority to the foundation and to broadening participation work in STEM in general.
Sure, absolutely. So the ABE program really is focused on bringing hands-on science into classrooms, particularly focused on exciting biotechnology experiences. It was founded, as you said, 30 years ago, at the time when biotechnology was a relatively new field. And at that time, several Amgen scientists decided that they really wanted to help local high school teachers in the Thousand Oaks, Ventura County area of California understand what this field was and inspire and educate both teachers and students. So they recruited a local high school teacher who came and spent a summer at Amgen to learn about recombinant DNA therapies that they were developing. And after the summer, the teacher said, this would be so great to get out into classrooms. We should develop something that we can actually bring out, because high school science teachers might have been educated 20, 30 years ago. They have no idea about this field. So he spent the next year working with these scientists, and they brought in a community college professor, developed a series of labs, and they found all the equipment and reagents for it in the various Amgen labs, and they put them into some cardboard boxes, and teachers would meet up in parking lots and shuffle the cardboard boxes around from school to school to implement the labs. pretty humble beginnings. And the program really grew in a very organic manner that way, where there was no Amgen Foundation at the time. There was just the corporation, and they would sort of cobble together the equipment and materials that they needed. As time went on, the company grew and wanted to have a larger impact. And they started bringing the program to new locations in areas where Amgen had set up either manufacturing or research and development facilities. From that pretty humble beginning, we're now at a program that is at 22 program sites in 13 countries across the globe. We serve about 90,000 students a year and 1,500 teachers. And we have 22 institutions that we're currently working with a few others soon coming on, that really serve as local program sites for their communities. And they are responsible for recruiting, training, and supporting their local high school teachers. They also are adapting the program to their local context and needs. And they have my program office that I run that supports them in doing all of this. So we really act as sort of the meta program site, helping understand what their needs are and also bringing best practices to them. So we run a robust community of practice across these program sites. We bring them together to learn from one another and to bring innovations that are developed in one location to others. So as I mentioned, we reach about 90,000 students a year, a typical year, which means over the past 30 years, we've reached almost 850,000 students across the globe. In the US, about half of the participating schools have a significant proportion of low-income students in them. And we also are in a number of communities where the primary student population are Latinx. So quite a large number of schools that have a significant Latinx population. We are, in the last year or so, the foundation has been more focused on how do we reach particularly largely Black communities and how do we do more to have an impact there. And so we're developing a new initiative right now where we are both looking at other funding partners in non-Amgen communities, as well as some new Amgen communities, including in Florida and Louisville, Kentucky, so that we can really be focused on who needs this program most, rather than just what's close to Amgen locations, which tend to be in more high-income areas, parents with more opportunities. So I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to do more to make sure that we're really bringing the program to students who will benefit from it in a way that we haven't necessarily in the past. We also, you asked about sort of what's the feedback and experience. We actually had a study conducted by an independent group a couple of years ago who found that students made some substantial gains in learning, but in my mind, even more importance, increased interest and confidence in doing science. While it's biotechnology, and that's not necessarily a core element of the science curriculum at the high school level, it is something students can really understand and grapple with, and we bring them, use hooks and stories that really bring them in to why they're learning about this. One of the stories, for example, is human insulin and the development of human insulin, where we might have once leaned upon using animal and getting insulin from that, which could cause reactions for people. Now we can create human insulin for people and help those who are insulin dependent diabetics. So we focus not only on training teachers in the biotechnology, but also really trying to help them understand what are the career options for students. And one of the newer initiatives that we have is that we have now a program called ABE Volunteers, where we recruit specifically Amgen staff from their various employee resource groups, and one of the groups that's been just phenomenal has been the Amgen Black Employee Network. They have been holding panels, particularly during COVID, to work with students from underserved populations and share with them their career pathways, which are not sort of traditional pathways to post-secondary work and the biotech field, but really individuals who show that they did not have role models, and yet they were able to get to these careers and these pathways, which has been really fabulous.
That's amazing, Rebecca. Thank you. It's really interesting to sort of see this trajectory for a very fundamental question about how do we change, how do we improve, how we teach science in classrooms for this, this sort of global initiative that's really working to make an impact in terms of how we teach in this particular subject area and the experiences that we give to learners all over the globe, and particularly when you think about the U.S., those populations that we're really thinking about in terms of equity and access. So that's great. Thank you. I guess my next question is really to think, when you think about sort of, again, as I just said, sort of the trajectory and the way this program has scaled, if you could kind of, for all of us, you've been mired in this for 10 plus years now, and then obviously even longer than that, if you sort of went up to that 10,000 foot level and really talk about a little bit about sort of the systemic sort of scale up strategy that you and Amgen as a foundation really engaged in to sort of grow the ABE program office. I think that's really useful for us to think about as we think about this work, and how we not only implement programs that have an impact and have change, but that we implement programs that can scale and that can sustain themselves. And so when you think about what's happened over the last 10 years, and how EDC has, come to become this administrative home to the program, to where it's now this incredibly robust international high school science program. If you could talk a little bit about sort of that arc, I think that would be really helpful to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I have to say, we really lucked out working with the Amgen Foundation. When they first came to us, the program had started growing, because the professor who worked with them in the LA program would call up a professor he knew at another institutional location they had identified, say, hey, I have this program I'm running here, why don't you run it too? And the programs, quite honestly, operated on a shoestring, and were able to provide sort of minimal training and support for teachers as requested. And they'd give the equipment and sort of say, okay, have good luck. And when Amgen Foundation came in, they said, come look at our program, tell us what we could do, how could we do this better? And at the time, we made some suggestions, and they balked at the price tag of that, which they went from, I think, supporting these sites at $100,000 a year, to us saying, this is going to take $2.5–3 million for a couple of years to build some systems. So they rejected it. And then they came back and they said, you know what, we really need to do this. We want to have an impact. And they have invested, and they have believed in us when we've said, the way to do this is to build systems and to be very intentional about how you do this, particularly as they went from a program that was developed in the United States and wanted to bring it abroad. So we went to Europe, where there are restrictions on developing GMOs. And part of this program is students actually make their own GMO. They modify bacterial DNA. So having some systems in place and training and support for these various institutions across the globe, and for them to really share information and best practices and learn from one another has been critical. Also, I think in really investing in professional learning for teachers. This year, we've launched a Master Teacher Fellowship, where we have brought teachers together. We had teachers apply from across the globe, and we're bringing them together to work on research projects of interest to them. And then we've assigned them mentors who are either scientists from Amgen or university, to help them as they learn about this topic, and then think about how do they bring it to their classroom? How do they support student learning in this area? And we're continuously looking for ways to further develop that. And so one of my staff actually brought to me the idea of, well, if we really want to reach out and have a greater impact in Black communities in the United States, for example, could we have a cohort where we're specifically reaching out to teachers of color who work in largely Black schools and provide them with a fellowship program specifically? So those are the kinds of things we're trying to learn from our teachers, what would best serve them, and then develop those systems.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. That's really useful to hear. I want to make sure we have time for our colleague from Bunker Hill Community College, Michael, but maybe a last question. And if you 30 seconds or a minute to talk about, when you think about sort of what's your vision for sort of expanding the scope of ABE going forward, the ABE program going forward?
Sure. So this program was started to bring cutting edge science into classrooms, and data science is critical in the life sciences. Many of this, as we've been looking at what do we develop next, everything comes back to data and how data is really changing how research and development happens in this field. It's also an incredibly important area for students to understand because so much around the future of medicine depends on data. And in particular, we just released a new curriculum module that's all about precision medicine and how does your own personal genetics affect how medications work for you. And it actually allows us to bring in an element of culturally responsive pedagogy where students can look at how science has been done to and for various populations, who's been included, who has not, what does that mean for their own particular communities? And so I think it's a really important piece of engaging students, particularly those from BIPOC communities, in understanding that and starting to develop some of that trust that we hear in the news is really missing for good reason. But how do we go about helping students engage in that and become part of the future of the life sciences industry?
That's great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm seeing lots of comments and questions. We will get to those in the Q&A. So thank you to everyone that's on and is posting. We are keeping track of those questions, and we'll make sure we have a bit of time at the end to pose them to our panelists. And after Rebecca, I want to turn back to Joyce, my colleague Joyce Malyn-Smith, and ask a couple of questions about another NSF-funded project, Joyce, that you lead. And we're running a little bit behind, so I want to sort of hopefully try and do this in a couple of minutes. Joyce, if you could talk about this other project that I'm thinking about that was around developing a two-course data science pathway for high school students. So the work that's been involved in developing that curriculum, sort of how you're supporting teachers in terms of professional development, but also a little bit about sort of the colleagues and partners that are involved in that work, including at the state level, et cetera. I think that would be, if you could sort of do that in a few minutes, I think that would be a great segue into our next panel. It would be really useful for our attendees to hear.
I would be happy to do that. So we've recently been funded for a research practice partnership to design, develop, and provide professional development and institutionalize an innovation pathway data career option for high school students to get that into schools by fall of 2023. And then also to produce research findings that will guide the development of successful innovations pathways that are funded across the state again. So this project will coordinate and support a research practice team that explores what it takes to successfully implement a model pathway. It will develop, test, and roll out actually a three-part pathway that begins with a civics plus data module that will introduce data literacy through the student-developed civics projects that are required by the state of Massachusetts and will be implemented very likely in high school social studies classes. And then the next step in that pathway will be a data visualization course, and following that, a Python plus data course that will again give students an opportunity to develop their data skills and interests over time as they're in high school. We'll provide summer training institutes for teachers to prepare for that. We'll be pilot testing the courses. Next year, we'll be pilot testing it's the data visualization course. The year after, we'll be pilot testing the Python plus data courses. And then after that, we'll have open summer training institutes for teachers who want to teach those courses. And we'll provide support throughout the school year for teachers who are teaching those courses throughout the school year. Our partners on this project, because it's a research practice partnership, the partners are a wide group of partners that include educators from the high schools, that include community colleges and industry. So our partners, again, are DESE with Anne DeMalley as a co-PI of this project. And another co-PI of the project is Deborah Boisvert, whom many of you may know for her work with computer science. Another co-PI will be Shireen Terrell from Burlington High School, who will be the lead of the practice part of the research practice partnership. We have experts from EDC again, who are working on research and practice and professional development and online learning. The lead development site, we have 3 development sites: Burlington High School, Everett, and Chelsea schools. All 3 of those schools will be working with us to develop the materials and the courses and pilot them before they're turned over to field test sites. We'll be recruiting 5 additional high schools as field test sites to test out this material as they move forward. And we're reaching out into the business community through our partner, the Mass Technology Leadership Council, that has a very active data working group. And our primary partner in community colleges is Bunker Hill Community College, and you'll be hearing from Mike next. Bunker Hill has been a long-standing partner with us, working on data projects for more than 5 or 6 years now, and we're just delighted to have him as a partner, and Bunker Hill is a partner in this initiative as well. I think that covers all of the main points of this project. So far, we found that educators have been very interested in getting this started. We've had, this is a new project, just started this year, but we've already had conversations with educators from the school systems who are ready to help us start developing the materials and testing some of them out this year, and which is really wonderful, considering all of the pressure educators have been under this year to want to take on yet another thing and begin to test out some data-rich, student-driven projects to include in their civics courses before the end of this year. So we're really excited about moving this along as well, and providing yet another pathway to data careers that the state of Massachusetts has to offer.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you very much. That's a great overview of that project, and it's a great opportunity for me to turn to our final speaker, Michael Harris, who is a professor of computer science at Bunker Hill Community College. So Michael, I am going to ask you to introduce yourself, as everyone else has, briefly, and then also address sort of the first of 2 or 3 questions that I have. Michael, you're at one of the largest and certainly the most diverse community colleges in the state, at Bunker Hill. So after you introduce yourself, if you could share a little bit with us about how you've seen sort of the growth of interest in data literacy and data analytics at the college, and if you're seeing that interest in course taking from really a wide range of students. So welcome, Michael.
Sure. Thank you very much for the introduction. For everyone, my name is Michael Harris. I've been a professor at Bunker Hill College for 7 years. I've been an adjunct at Bunker Hill College since 2008. It's that 13 years now. It's getting up there. My traditional background was mechanical engineering. So when I graduated college, I worked on designing telescopes for space. I worked for Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, doing a lot of data analysis for them. I was doing a lot of FEA analysis. From there, I went to Irobot. I worked at Irobot for a few years. I worked on the SUGVI, which was a robot for the Army. While I was at Irobot, I took a job adjuncting at Bunker Hill, and I realized that my calling was definitely not in engineering, and it's more in teaching. I had a lot more passion for my job. So 2014 came around, I made the switch, and I went into engineering full-time. Now, getting back to the went into teaching full time. Sorry, getting back to the question. So it seemed like a 2-part question. So there are 2 different perspectives. First off, from the college level perspective and interest in the past. So we've been doing data science, or we've developed data science starting in 2015 was our first program. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was non-existent in terms of the content that was online. the interest. When I started the program, there were 2 degree offerings in the entire country, certificate offerings in the field of data science. Now there's over 30, and there's probably a lot more. This is from 2019, there are over 30. The resources that we use currently are vast. Now, 6 years ago, that wasn't the case. So resources that we have now, there's a lot of OER resources, so OER books. Ones that we use are R4DS. It's a book written by Hadley Wickham. ISLR, the Introduction to Statistical Learning. There's various MOOCs that are out there. The amount of resources that are out there are endless. So if a student is passionate about the field, not only can they get the information from the classroom, but there's a lot of different resources online they can learn as well. On top of that, the amount of grants is increasing tremendously as well, which is from my standpoint, I've had in the past month, I've had 3 different requests for different grants because of the work that I've done. Some of them are really cool. One grant that we submitted a proposal for, it's for creating internships for data science students. So it's in conjunction with Tufts, and we're going to be grabbing a cohort from Bunker Hill and Tufts and other colleges in the area. Grab a couple students from each college, and they're going to work as a cohort at an internship in local companies. So there's some cool stuff that's going on right now. And this stuff was non-existent 6 years ago. Excuse me. Now, from the student level, I am seeing increased engagement, and also there's a question about a wide spectrum of students. So the spectrum of students that we get, and one of the things that's great about Bunker Hill is the fact that we have such a diverse student population. So it's roughly 25% across the board in different demographics, 25% Caucasian, Black, Hispanic, and other. So it's a really diverse student population. So it's great for me teaching because I have all these great different viewpoints. It's kind of like a melting pot of what the country is, you know. So we have an eclectic group of students. In terms of the data science courses, I'm seeing that representation from across the college. Now, one of the things that we are offering is the data science course at night. And what that did is that attracted people from business. So I have roughly, I'd say maybe 30% of the students already have bachelor's or master's degrees, and they're looking to go either learn about the field, or they're interested about the field, or they want to change the field that they're in. They might be in biology and they want to get into data science. So for my class itself, I want to say maybe 2 to 3 students a year sending recommendations for to college. I'm writing recommendations for them. On top of that, I've had students that came through the Bunker Hill program that went to Chicago, University of Chicago, NYU, NC State, Georgia Tech. So some of the top schools around in terms of master's programs the students are getting into. But what they're doing is they're going to the program to get their interest piqued. In terms of the demographics for male to female, it's still predominantly male, but the good thing is there's an uptick. So when I started the program, maybe 1 female a semester, if I'm lucky 2. Now it's 3 and 4. Now, again, it's anecdotal evidence, but I am seeing a bit more students in the data science programs. An interesting note about the demographics, though, for my female students in the database courses, so for the SQL courses, there's roughly a 40 to 50% female population in those courses compared to the data science courses. So it's something that I was looking at the data last night, something that I was reviewing, and it kind of this interesting kind of note that I wanted to research more into. Why are women why are they going more towards SQL than they are for data science? But traditionally speaking, we're still low on the females in the field, but we are seeing a little bit of an uptick, which is good.
Great. Thank you, Michael. That's a really great overview. The next question I have is if you could help us if you could talk to us really about sort of the process that, you know, in part you really co-led at Bunker Hill to develop this new Data Analytics Associates of Science degree, which is, you know, you have the stackable program and really what advice you can give or share with other community colleges that are interested in doing something very similar to what Bunker Hill has done.
Sure. At first, I'll talk about the process, then I'll get into the advice. But for the process, we took it slow at Bunker Hill, so the entire process for completing the associates took almost 5 years. We started in 2015. We developed our first course. It was a course in R, programming language R, and we also developed a data management certificate. So that certificate was designed for people that were just interested in the field of data. So what is this field of data science? What is data? How can I start to analyze data? How can I open a database up and start querying it? How can I sift through data? And that was what the initial certificate was. It was basically about data literacy. And that was in 2015. In 2017, we developed a data analytics certificate. So with that certificate came a second course that we developed, a second course in R, which was an analytics course, and that one dealt with predictive modeling. In the analytics certificate, we also added Python. We added a course in Linux, and the idea for the analytics certificate is kind of taking that data literacy a bit further and teaching students how to use some of the skills that they're learning in terms of dealing with the databases. And then finally, in 2019, we had a full-blown data analytics associate's degree. And in the associate's degree, we basically filled everything out. We filled out all our math courses. We created a data visualization course that goes in there that went into the analytics degree. And right now, we're still in the process of changing everything. So for example, the data visualization course that's in the AS degree, that's going on the data management certificate. We're going to be developing this summer a second data analytics in Python course. So it's an ongoing process. This process continues to change. It's not something that's set in stone. For us, it took us a lot longer to do it because it was basically myself doing it. I developed 3 courses alongside the analytics degree, a course usually every other year. So I'll be developing another course this year for Python this summer. Now, in terms of advice, for people that are looking to build the programs and going into the field, there's a number of different things. First off is when you're placing students for jobs in industry, one of the things that you should be focusing on when you're talking to the prospective employers is what type of a value these students are going to add. So one of the big things in data science is cleaning data. So students that come out of the program are really good at cleaning data. We have a lot of programs and a lot of projects that are based on it. Now, approximately anywhere from 60 to 90% of work in data science is going to be getting data in the correct format that you need. Well, if you're paying a data scientist 6 figures to do this, when you can pay a person coming out of community college roughly less than half of that, there's value added to it. So when I'm ever talking to people in industry, I always kind of focus on that area. It show them, hey, you have a cost savings here. There's money to make for your company or for who you work for. So that always piques their interest. Second thing is listen to industry. Listen to what they have to say. They're the ones that know exactly what they're going to be, the skill set they need. So specifically listen to what they need for students. On top of it, if there's a prospective big employer that can take a number of students, don't be afraid to teach the software that they're using in the class. So for example, we teach R and Python at Bunker Hill, but if we had a prospective employer that said, hey, we can create 6 different internships if you give them exposure to SAS, we could then in turn teach SAS as well. So don't get set in stone exactly what your program is going to be. Listen to what industry says and focus more towards what they want. Be adept at change. As I mentioned before, this program is constantly changing. It's going to be changing as long as I'm teaching. I'll be adding things and removing things to it. On top of it, everyone makes mistakes. So as I created this program, I made mistakes when I created it. I had a networking course in there. Well, the networking course is gone, and we put a different course in there as well. So listen to what people say, listen to the students, take surveys from the students, and listen to what they have to say and take that to heart. And finally, for advice, so I look at my job as I'm not looking to teach everything in the field. I'm looking to pique their interest. I'm not teaching at a four-year college. I'm not teaching junior and senior level courses. I'm not teaching at a master's program. I'm teaching at a community college. So part of my job is to get students interested in data, to get students interested in the field. So kind of understand that as a lens when you're designing your course and you're teaching it. So for example, just a couple quick things that I've done at Bunker Hill. When we started the program, we used Deflategate as one of the lessons that for the Tom Brady fans out there. Last summer, we heavily on COVID data. So scraping data off of GitHub from the Johns Hopkins website, creating functions and using the functions to show what's going on with the data in real time. Because usually there's a lag behind what society's seeing to what the data says. So if you see the spike coming, no, all right, right now is when I should be staying inside, not 3 months or 3 weeks from now when we have 5 times as many people. So looking at specific data sets that will pique their interest. On top of it, looking at things from a cultural and equity lens. So one of the assignments that we worked on was about police stops and looking to see if there's racial bias in police stops. So there's this test called the Veil of Darkness test, which looks at specific stops at, say, 6 o'clock at night during the wintertime and during the summertime. So if there's a higher percentage of minorities that are stopped during daylight at the same time, so at 6 o'clock in the summertime, there's a higher percentage of minorities stopped in one area than in the wintertime, then that can lead to, there could be some racial bias in there. So looking at some of the more advanced tests, but looking at it through that equity lens and finding out things that students are interested in.
Great, thank you, Michael. Oh, so much that we can dig into. So really great to hear what Bunker Hill has been doing and sort of how all of this has sort of played out at the college. I did have a last question from you, but we have so many questions in chat. I'm going to pose that last question, but not ask you to respond because
Sure.
I hope there'll be an opportunity for you to respond in the context of the chat. My last question was really, when you think about opportunities for graduates of this new program that you talked about in terms of sort of immediate employment opportunities or continuation on to other colleges or programs for bachelor's degrees, what do you think about those opportunities? And I think what are the opportunities that are available for folks coming out of the Bunker Hill program? And I think that is one of many questions in chat that we want to get to. So I'm going to thank our panelists very much. This has been great, a lot of important stuff for us to think about and reflect on and ask questions about. My colleague, Kevin Waterman, is going to lead us through the Q&A and try to get us through all the rich engagement there's been in chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin now.
All right, I'm going to start off with one that I think garnered a lot of chat responses already. Is culturally responsive pedagogy used for engagement in data? It is important to focus on the contribution that culturally diverse communities provide to the development of the data science field. So I leave that to the panelists to respond.
I can briefly just speak to this. I actually mentioned it at the end of my remarks, but we really feel it is critical if we want to engage students in looking at data to use it in a way that allows them to look at their own communities, their own health issues that affect their communities. And so very clearly that's a critical piece and a really great way to engage the students if they can look at something that's really important to themselves personally, just as teenagers, since that's our core population. And so it's something we're continuously developing in our programs and looking for opportunities to build on.
I'd like to jump in on that as well.
Please.
In the projects that I talked about, we've worked with educators across the country to develop a set of papers asking them to describe strategies that build equity within their classroom, equitable teaching strategies that they can use in their classrooms. And we're using the information from these papers to guide not only the curriculum development that's going into the projects I've been talking about, but also the pedagogy that's used as teachers are teaching those courses.
And I can add just a little bit from Bunker Hill. We actually received a Culture and Equities grant. The course that we're developing in the summertime, the data analytics and Python course, it's going to be developed with that lens. So a lot of the content that we're putting in is going to be culturally relevant content as well.
The one thing that I would add is obviously a lot of the work that we do, especially the research work that we do, is federally funded. And so an integral part of those proposals to get them funded is to be working with a really diverse audience when we're doing development and testing in classrooms, making sure that the classrooms that we're working with are broadly representative of the society that we live in, that we're not just working with, with privileged students, but that we're working with students in districts, with a variety of different economic, socioeconomic, and culturally diverse representation.
Well, it's good you said that, Randy, because that segues me to the next question quite well, which is how do you ensure to get these programs out to classrooms where there are teachers who may not know about them, especially in underserved schools?
Yeah, I think somebody alluded to this in the comments. I mean, it's relationships. It's about the people that it's about having relationships with districts. There's a project that we're working on right now, the Streams of Data project, where we're working with fourth graders, and we're partnering with the American Geosciences Institute. And so, they do education all over the United States, but they're really closely tied to some of these districts in Maryland. Really diverse districts. And so it's about those relationships that AGI has with all the teachers that they've worked with all the programs that they run, and using that to get us into those classrooms so that we can be learning about those students' needs and what they bring to the table.
I agree with Randy as well. It's the common interests that partners in a project have, and it's building those partnerships at the beginning of a project. I think a really good example is that the two projects I talked about today were partnerships with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, so that the needs and interests of the department were embedded into the project, and therefore the department itself has a vested interest in making sure that the projects are known across the state, and the opportunities that the project offers are offered to or made available, and that school systems across the state know about them.
All right. And now on a similar vein, since these great programs you're describing are not available to all students everywhere, what can a student do now, today, to prepare themselves toward pursuing a career in data science with what they have available?
So I can go from Bunker Hill's perspective. So right now, a student coming into Bunker Hill has an opportunity to go into job placement or career for a career opportunity, or they can go into a four-year college. Currently, we have a learn and earn program set up at Bunker Hill, which allows students to set up, get internships. I just did a quick look yesterday. Eaton Vance has 3 up, 2 IT business analysts and a business analyst internship. So good company, really good internships. On top of that, there's other companies that contact me on an occasional basis. Hey, I'm Mike over at Resurity. Do you have any students that could potentially work here. So I do some research on the company, and then I usually send them a few students over. In terms of continuing their education, we have an articulation agreement. It's not finalized yet, it's in governance, but it's set up with Northeastern CPS, so their Center for Professional Studies. So the idea is a student coming into Bunker Hill can either go into a job once they graduate with an associate's or continue on their education to the 4-year. What I always tell students, though, even if they go directly into a job, continue your education. If you have an associate's degree in the data science field, you're not going to be taken as seriously as if you have your bachelor's or master's degree. So continue on that education as well.
And Michael, are there things that would be helpful for a high school student to do to better on-ramp into your program?
Yeah, so it some of the things and some of the things that Joyce was talking about earlier, we're developing the pathway program. So a data visualization course, for example, I'm going to be working on that in the future. I would suggest starting to learn a computer language. Most likely the best one to be learned would be Python, because that gives you kind of the most branches to go off of. In data science, there's 2 predominant languages, which one's Python, the other one's R. But with Python, you can go into many other fields. There's plenty of places that use Python. With R, you're strictly speaking dealing with data. R is a statistical language instead of a programming language. So I'd suggest learning Python and also learning statistics. So those are kind of the 2 foundations. At the high school level, you'll be able to learn and pick up.
This also comes back to that point I made about convergence and about the intersections of skills in various disciplines that occur, and that although we're talking about specifically about data pathways, the fact that Mike talked about a computer science course tells us that there's great overlap in these things, and we need to begin to look at the convergence of these fields differently than we have in the past, particularly in education.
The next question is, have any longitudinal studies evaluated how these programs change students' career trajectories, not just pre and post surveys? Districts brought in at a point that they are tracking impact.
For me, I'm not aware of any studies, but I'll let the other panel go. Everything's in its infancy right now, so I don't know if they've had time to do the studies yet, but that's a great question.
There's a lot of research out there traditionally around career development and what creates impact over the long term. There's more than 50 years of research out there on different kinds of things, but the projects we're talking about now are really dealing with some new topics and some new and emerging fields, and there's little that I know about that's been done on these specific areas.
Great. What do we do for individuals who don't already have bachelor's and master's degrees, but are eager to pursue education in this field? People that are trying to make a career change, and adults with other responsibilities outside of school.
I would point them to Michael's program at Bunker Hill Community College and other community colleges out there. Yep. That's the most cost-effective and quickest way to get the specific skills you might be looking for.
I couldn't agree with you more, Joyce. Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, one of the great things about the program that we have at Bunker Hill, a student can graduate if they go to Bunker Hill and then take night courses. So I have my program set up where the core courses are at night for the students to take. So if they're working full time, or if they're a mother, or trying to fit it in between a schedule, we have our courses are facilitated that way. So the idea is you can graduate from Bunker Hill, then you'll be able to go directly into Northeastern. Currently, Northeastern has a federal grant, which is able to pay for over 50% of their tuition going there from Bunker Hill because it's underserved institution. So the idea is within 4 years time frame from now, you could have a bachelor's degree in data science for under $50,000. And that's the most cost-effective option, considering it'll cost you over $50,000 for a single year at Boston University.
Another issue that came up in chat was related to our first panel where we had industry experts talk about what they were looking for in employees. And the question came about whether certification programs in data science were recognizable and sufficient enough for a lot of employers to accept people in jobs, or were they looking for more? So if somebody wants to do a quick recap of some of the things we talked about in one and add on to it, that'd be great.
Sure, I had mentioned in the chat actually that one of the things that the first panel I talked about was, that the life sciences industry in particular does really put a lot of emphasis on having advanced degrees in life sciences, biotech, so forth, and having some of that data science skills and knowledge. But what they did talk about the fact that there are programs, particularly internships and opportunities for people to come into the life sciences industry and start gaining some of that knowledge. I think the reality is this is a new but hugely growing area. Data science went from being part of the life sciences industry to being a really huge sector of life sciences at a core of it. And so the need for more and more people is going to grow. And I think the life sciences industry is also going to have to adapt a bit about how they're approaching that if they're going to keep up. There just aren't enough people with all those advanced degrees to meet that need. And so having opportunities to move into the life sciences industry with some of the data science skills and knowledge is going to be key.
And we did hear from one of the panelists that there were jobs within, I believe it was the Mass General panelist, that were not required the advanced degrees, that there were more about market research and patient demography and things like that.
Right.
So it's going to vary from industry to industry. And what I heard and what Rebecca just said was in life sciences, they really wanted people that understood the biology first, and that they would easily accept the certificate in data science if they wanted a data scientist, as long as they had the biological background. So I'm going to close out here with one last question, and each panelist can have a minute or two to talk about it. And it's kind of the broad, what's next for you? What's the next big thing you're looking to address? And why don't we start with, who's looking at me? Rebecca.
I didn't blink fast enough, clearly. Our next big thing is really developing more opportunities for students to explore areas of their own interests. So providing the tools and resources and the scaffolding so that they can take data sets of their own interest in choosing it and learn how to clean them up, do some of these basic things that Michael was talking about, so that we can hopefully inspire them at an even younger age. And they can go on to more advanced skill building in that area.
And how about Randy next?
Yeah, I think that, I mentioned earlier that one of our focuses is definitely shifting from doing research on that student facing to starting to shift our focus to more instruction, working with teachers, developing the instructional methodologies that it takes to effectively teach data literacy skills at all levels. There's a built-in multiplier effect there. If you do an intervention that involves 20 students, you've taught 20 students. If you do an intervention that teaches 20 students, every one of them is going to be teaching 20 more, or that if you teach 20 teachers, every one of them is going to be teaching 20 students every year. And so all of a sudden you've impacted, you have a much broader impact. The other thing in terms of subject areas is, Rebecca just alluded to this, is that the nature of data science is changing as data science becomes so much more prevalent across so many different sectors of inquiry. I think that, that we really need to understand how data science is being used in different places. So at this intersection between data science and computer science and biology, things like bioinformatics and metagenomics and these exploding fields that lie at that intersection, we really need to understand what are the unique skills for that and how do we prepare students to succeed in that. There's also an interesting and open question about the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that will change what data science means. It may be a very different field 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as we start integrating those new technologies into routine data science.
Great. And how about Michael next?
Yeah, so I mentioned a few of it before at Bunker Hill. One of the things that we've been working on, it's basically finalized, it's in governance, is having that articulation agreement set up with Northeastern. It's going to be a real benefit to the students because they have grant money to pay for a lot of their college. I have a couple grants that I'm also going to be working on. One of them is the data visualization grant Joyce talked about before or previously, where it's going to be a pathway grant where we're going to be teaching data science in the high school range. There's also a grant from Tufts where we're going to be creating internships as a cohort that I mentioned. And then finally, we're also developing analytical Python course. And again, that course, it's going to be developed with that cultural lens kind of at the core. So we're going to be picking projects and specific data sets, which will allow students to tackle those questions.
Great, great. And Joyce.
Yes, mine goes back to a bit about what Randy was talking about. I have a clear idea about what I need to look at next. And that has to do with the foundational skills needed where different disciplines converge. If discovery and innovation is going to be happening at the intersections of disciplines, and we want our future workforce to be the discoverers and the innovators, we not only need to know what do those skills look like, but what are the foundational skills that we need to build into K-12 so that students are ready to move into those pathways and ready to move into those higher level education programs as they become developed. It reminds me of the old art color wheel. If technical and social and soft skills in one discipline are blue and in another discipline are yellow, when we bring them together, we get a green. What does that green look like? Are there new skill sets? Is there something new that's going to come out of that intersection that we haven't yet anticipated? And that's what really excites me about the next set of questions to discover.
Great, great, thanks. And Sarita.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Kevin, for moderating the Q&A. Thank you to all of our panelists, to Randy, Joyce, Rebecca, Michael. Really insightful comments based on your deep experience and your work in terms of sort of that K-12 post-secondary trajectory into STEM educational pathways and careers, how to really attend to issues of equity and access and inclusion, how to think about all those transition points, elementary to middle school to high school to community college to college, and again, with issues of equity and access really central. So this has been a wonderful capstone event to our 4-part panel series. Thank you to all of you that have been a part of this whole journey, starting with our first panel in December. As I've said, go to our website, datascience.edc.org. We will have a recording of this panel, as well as a brief that this panel produces in terms of summary of all the wonderful recommendations from our panelists, as well as information from our prior 3 panels. Our next step, proceeding from this panel series, is really the assembling of this working group to think about how we kind of distill what we've learned in the course of these discussions and really think about a strategic, as I said earlier, programmatic funding plan for what we hope will be a really systemic, sustainable, scalable early stage initiative for growing the size and the diversity of the data science workforce. So thank you all for being a part of this. Stay in touch via our website. Thank you again to our panelists. Any questions, please be in touch with us. And it was great to have you all here today. So thank you and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.